I think research is two things. I think research is science and research is project. And I think that when we think of qualitative research, we can see that on both of those counts, qualitative research has made, in the case of science, conceptual, theoretical contributions. In fact, it's been largely through qualitative research, qualitative analysis of some sort, that most serious social science questions have actually got going, I think, in sociology and anthropology certainly, and in education as well. Is that to understand the ways in which you can think rigorously in a qualitative way is also kind of primordially relevant to the matter of quantitative research as well. Is that the production, the understanding of constructs and concepts is the nature of the qualities of the things you wish to quantify. That initial reasoning, unless you're simply taking on hand-me-down constructs or hand-me-down scales or tests or something or other, then you're actually having to do work about conceptual models, and this is necessarily qualitative. It's not just theoretical, it's about qualities. It's about the association, the relationships among qualities of practice or among conditions and practice and so on, and what features of an environment produce what kinds of outcomes and qualities of teachers and students and so on. So there is necessarily, often covertly, built into any quantitative, apparently largely or solely quantitative program, an awful lot of at least covert qualitative thought. So it strikes me that there should be at least some understanding of the nature of theorising about qualities that's built into this, prior to simply going to constructs and their measurability or otherwise. So I think that that's a second layer of a possible answer to these things. Qualitative research in education is one of those kinds of questions where, again, in the background, you're always reflecting on qualitative research vis-a-vis or in contrast with quantitative research. So, which is okay as long as we sort of know we're doing that. And I think that there's I have some fairly simple-minded responses, I think, to the question of the significance of qualitative research in education. And one of them is that I think that if there is no active and well theorized community of qualitative researchers in education, then it is very hard to find out anything new, because you are working with compact concepts that you have developed and, if you like, encased into conceptual objects that are framed and defined by their statistical properties and their statistical coherence as a thing, if you like, as things. And so those things can be refound, and correlations between those things and other things can be found. But also as projected qualitative work as part of a set of activities in the world that people who want to use organised inquiry to affect policy or practice, directly with those goals, and the ability of qualitative researchers to partner with researchers from different frameworks in order to effect something worth effecting in terms of policy and practice. And it's, I think, the qualitative work, the experience of rigorously conducted the presentation of it, is what can really be very convincing morally and emotionally, in terms of changing policy or changing practices. There was a confluence of mathematical ideas, computational processes, and notions of probability that allowed Quetelet and other people to introduce the notion of the average citizen, and then the deviations from the average citizen, and normally distributed features, and then that got worked up again by Binet, 50 years later. So it's always struck me that was a relatively late intervention in thinking about the state and society, but also that it was a conceptually very radical intervention. It's not, it's quite a long way away from thinking organically about human, individual and social experience to start thinking that you can locate people on a normal curve and they've got attributes that are statistically stable following certain kinds of measurements and so on and so on. That seems to me to be, a potentially implausible way of thinking about human behaviour, which has gripped, partly because of its efficacy, apparent efficacy in informing administration policy, but also because I think it's gripped partly because we have developed measurement techniques which give us a view of the individual as a bundle of relatively stable attributes that we should be able to assess as we can biologically, and that we can give them social and psychological significance. So I think the 20th century brought with it a theory of individualisation, particularly in the West, that married up relatively nicely to these ways of using computational methods for mapping people. The thing that's always struck me, and I'm speaking now as somebody who was trained as a quantitative researcher within cognitive science, it's always struck me how defensive qualitative researchers have been. They have always been, in a sense, you can say the poor cousin, but they have often behaved as if they are the unstable member of the partnership, quantitative-qualitative, that they are the member that needs to defend itself, defend its existence, justify its existence in some way. And that's curious to me, because when you go back and look at, even the very sort of embryonic things of observational studies that you would think of, and the ways in which people tried to theorise in the presence of observation and data a long time ago. I think of Charles Darwin's studies of childhood, and more recently Piaget and people like that, and a whole lot of people in between. If you look at those big questions that remain with us, even if Piagetian theory as an edifice has been set aside, those big questions about growth and development and change, they were not formulated by experimentalists or by measurement theory people. They were formulated by people trying to theorise in the presence of observing the qualities of experience and practice that they saw around them. So it strikes me that there is a sort of ancestral privilege that's due to qualitative work, which is not to say it's not modern.